My guest today is blogger, podcaster, columnist, fashion TV host, and writer who also happens to have had MS for over 20 years. Ardra Shephard from Tripping on Air. Welcome, Ardra.
Thank you for having me, Vickie. It's great to be here.
I'm so excited that you're back. I am especially thrilled because I just finished reading your book, Fall-osophy, My Trip Through Life with MS, a memoir, and it was fantastic. So we're going to dive into it today and talk all about it. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences in such a sassy, witty, funny, and poignant way. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for reading. It's been really exciting to talk to people who are connecting with the book and relating to it. Yeah, I'm really happy to dig into it.
It's great. So to start, tell me, what was your why? Why did you decide that you would put your story in a memoir form?
I mean, I started writing a blog almost 10 years ago now, and it really is kind of the evolution of that, connecting with readers about my experience of having MS. But really, when I was diagnosed, like you said, over 20 years ago, I wasn't finding the kind of book or message that would have helped me. So I really wanted to write something that I needed to hear.
That's great. I think like all of us, I was diagnosed almost 9 years ago, but my first symptoms were almost 20 years ago. And they mentioned MS back then. And like you, I went looking for information and I didn't find a lot out there. There wasn't as much information. And it would have been so helpful to have a book like yours that had the experiences and the the life that you've led and how you've led a good life, and how important it is for us to realize that we can live a good life with MS. Talk a little bit about that.
I think there were books that I read back then and over the years. Surprisingly, a number of them were written by men, which is great, but as a woman, I wasn't feeling myself in those stories. And also, men that were a few decades older than me. Some of the other stories that I'd read felt like not true enough, or just maybe that's the wrong way to characterize it, but just like not gritty, like not the real shit of it. I didn't need stories that, were about miracle cures or overcoming. I needed stories that were like, here's how hard it is, and here's what you can do about it, or here's how you can live a good life. Anyway, I needed a story that was like female centered and, just like, I don't know, those kinds of things, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. One of the things that you highlight in the book is making connections with others and how important that is. What do you mean by connections with others, and how important is it to you?
MS can be so lonely and isolating, and I have learned over the years that sometimes just feeling or knowing that there's somebody out there who's dealing with the same thing and that they can do it can be enough for me to kind of get through on that day, just not feeling like I'm the only one. And it's something we kind of all know intellectually, but it doesn't make as much sense unless, you have that face to face, whether it's virtual or in person, of, just feeling like somebody out there also gets it and knows what that's like. So, you know, MS is such a variable disease. There's so many, it looks so different in so many people. And so I always tell people who are first diagnosed or any stage of MS, I think it's really important to connect with people who are at a similar life stage and who have similar symptoms. So, at the time of my diagnosis and where the book starts, I'm 23 and single and trying to figure out friendships and careers and romance and like what my life is going to look like. And so it wasn't helpful for me to be connected with people who are 20 years older than me and far more disabled at that point. But in different points in my MS, when I started to need mobility aids, then it became really important for me to have connections and role models and other people who had navigated that successfully and come out on the other side and been able to say like, yeah, this is hard, but you can do it. And I just think we need that at every stage of the game. And I mean, that's just MS. It's like everything in life that's hard.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned not needing to connect with people who were at different stages, and, early on in the book, you talk about going to your first MS support group meeting. One of the things that I found myself doing throughout your book was going, "Yes, yes, yes, I've been there, I experienced that, that's so true." Um, when I went to my very first MS support group meeting, it was overwhelming for me. Um, I was not at the place that those people were at. Like you said, they were older and many of them were using mobility aids, and it was shocking for me, to walk in there and to see that. Talk a little bit about that experience for you.
It's kind of a tricky thing to talk about. It was important for me to write it in the book because I know a lot of us do go through this, and no shade on these groups that are so important for
Mhm.
everyone. It's just I don't think it makes sense to throw us all together in the same room, especially for people who are nearly newly MS brain. For those who are newly diagnosed, it can be really scary to be presented with a possible future without any context, without any guidance, without any counseling around that. And so, um, yeah, I think things must be changing in terms of the support that people who are younger and who are just figuring this out or just being diagnosed what they can access. But I mean, I think certainly for me, that was undoing a lot of internalized ableism also about what I thought it meant to be disabled. But you can't do that on like day one of your diagnosis or year one, even when you just are trying to figure out how to survive.
Yeah, absolutely. My first year or 2 after diagnosis, even though I knew it was coming, all the symptoms said it was coming, and I'd had the first relapse many years before. That first year or 2 were really times of adjustment for me, and I think
Mhm.
for me, walking into that first support group meeting was a shock to my system, and I wasn't at that place in my journey yet. Um
Understandably, it's like the physical manifestation of your biggest fears, right?
Yep.
It's not maybe the support you need right at the beginning. We need different groups for different people for different stages. We are a spectrum, this
Yep.
illness is. Yeah.
Yep. You also talk a lot in the book about, the difficulties of living with MS, but it doesn't have to be our whole identity.
Do I say that? Because I feel like it's like such a part of my identity that, yeah, I don't even know if I say that in those words. Like it took me a long time to accept that
Mm,
MS is a part of my identity because it feels like that's something that is negative and that we're supposed to deny it, but
mm,
it doesn't really help you cope with it if you do deny it. But, you know, if you Google my name, MS is coming up. Like it's a big part of how at least the like people who aren't in my inner circle know me. But we all have multiple identities. And I think it's really important to cultivate as many identities as you can because MS can threaten a lot of them, whether it's professionally or recreationally, your hobbies, relationships, even it can. And so I have buffered myself against those potential losses by trying to cultivate lots of identities and also to recognize that I have a lot of identities that have value. MS is part of it, but I am a dog mom and a wife and an aunt and a friend and a reader and a traveler and a learner of languages and all these things, right?
you talk about our different identities, and, you are a singer as well, but you don't sing like you used to, but you have found ways to get the same feelings that
Yeah.
singing used to bring you. Talk a little bit how you did that.
I don't sing at all anymore, and for a long time, singing was such a big part of my identity that I thought I wouldn't know who I was without it. And so that was a loss for me that took some figuring out for sure. I was really intentional about it. I thought, what are the things that I get out of singing? You'll see if you read the book that I make lists. And I realized eventually that there were other things I could do that could produce the same kind of feelings that I got from singing. So, I love telling stories. I love being artistic. I love being center of attention. I love performing, and in a way, writing for me fills up a lot of that need. If that answers the question.
It does, it does. You found other ways to find things to fill that space. You may not get that
Yeah.
same feeling of being on stage, being a writer, but it does help fill that space.
But honestly, it is kind of the same feeling. Like, I read a chapter at my book launch that was like I got to wear a beautiful dress, in a room full of people, and in almost like more no, not almost, like, definitely more of me sharing than actually singing. It really felt like a stage door day, as I call them in the book.
So I love that you still can feel that way, and even more so, you didn't lose a part of yourself. It's just evolving and changing. That's great. Um, in the book, it's funny, and you have such a great sense of wit, but you also tell it like it is. And I think that's important for us to hear. There is, my YouTube channel is all about living well with MS, and I really try to put the positive spin on it, but still acknowledge that living with MS is hard. It is freaking hard. And I really like that you include that in the book and you don't sugarcoat it.
It was really important for me because I do feel like there are some books that I've read or, disability or chronic illnesses stories that I've read that kind of give the message of like, it's not that bad. And I feel like it is that bad. But like it is that bad, but it's not necessarily the thief of joy. You can still have a joyful life, but it's gonna be hard.
Absolutely. Um, you talk a little bit about disability pride and how do how we live marginalized in some ways, and having pride and disability can be something that you wrestled with.
I mean, I still probably wrestle with it. There is a Disability Pride Month in the United States.
Yeah.
I think we've kind of unofficially co-opted it here in Canada. It's a concept that initially struck me as bizarro. Like, how can I be proud of the thing that diminishes me? But I've given this a lot of thought. And, being the disability pride to me doesn't mean that I like having MS, that I enjoy it in any way, like 0 stars, do not recommend. But I am proud of my life and I refuse to be diminished. I refuse to be treated as like a second class citizen. I think that claiming pride in identity helps us more collectively advocate for things like accessibility and better rights. Like I don't know what you said initially in the question about a little bit marginalized or something. That's not what you said, but I'm like, there's definitely this marginalization, right? And there is this impulse that I think has been taught to us in kind of an ableist world to um, like deny that we're disabled. It was a really hard identity for me to accept. For a long time I was like, well, I'm sick, I have MS, but I'm not disabled, until I started to need mobility aids, and then it was like, well, maybe you are disabled. But I it's still like really hard to say that and really hard to accept that. But if we can't say it, if we can't like put our hands up and say like, that's me, I'm disabled, then we don't acknowledge that there is a need to have accessible spaces and more inclusivity and rights. You know, if we're like, there's no problem, then we don't need to come up with any solutions.
Absolutely. Where you live in an older city, and accessibility can be a problem. I don't run into that as much here, and I don't have any physical disabilities as of yet, but it is on my mind a lot. And I notice when I go places. My husband and I recently went away and visited some family. And, I noticed the curbs, I noticed the
Yeah.
stairs, I noticed where the bathrooms are, all those things that we tick off when we're entering a new situation. So it is important for us to acknowledge we are disabled,
Yeah.
and things need to change. I every year go to my state capitol. We have an MS activism day every year at the state capitol, and one year was about having accessibility at doctors' offices. And we weren't saying that you had to change all the equipment, but we were saying when you change the equipment, it needs to be accessible. The tables need to be accessible, x-rays need to be accessible, you need to be able to have a full exam.
And you
And
have to say this to doctors.
yeah, yeah, and in the state, and I this was just a couple of years ago. I'm thinking, how can we be this far advanced and still have to say
Honestly,
everybody needs a table they can get on at the doctor's office?
it's hard, and I live in Toronto, so it's not that old of a city.
Yep,
We like to brag here that we are the most diverse, multicultural city in the world,
yep,
you know, but disability is a part of diversity, and we're not doing enough
yeah.
for disabled people. One of the most accessible cities that I've been to is Barcelona, and that is way older than Toronto.
Oh, wow.
So, where there's a will, there's a way. We can make things happen, and we're not doing
Yep, yep, yep. So you brought up,
enough.
aids, mobility aids, and
Yeah.
you are a fashionista, and for a while, it was hard for you to have a mobility aid in your photos, but now you've kind of embraced it, and you have coined the phrase "babes with mobility aids." Talk about how you have come to embrace your aids in your fashion.
Part of it is like there isn't a choice at some point. And I think when MS becomes progressive, or when my MS became progressive, there's kind of this like murky gray area where you would be better served by using a cane, or I knew that it would buy me more time or whatever. But it was like just too much to consider, right? I felt um, horrified at being seen with a cane. I would hide it, like you said, in photos. I really felt this stigma. It invited questions like, what's wrong with you? What happened to you? That only got worse when I started using a rollator. But, there did come this time where using a cane was like a choice that I could or couldn't make, and maybe wasn't the best choice to prioritize aesthetics over safety and function. But as my illness progressed, it was less of a choice, right? Then I had to use it. And the same thing happened with my rollator. It was like, well, I could use a rollator, but I could maybe get away with the cane, and then maybe I fell publicly and started using the rollator a bit more. But at a certain point, it was like, okay, this is part of my look now. How can I make the most of it? And I Googled, this like maybe 2016, 2017, I was looking online for people who looked like young and stylish, who also had these accessories, let's call them, of disability, and I couldn't find any. And that just really reinforced for me this like feeling of being left out of the culture and the conversation and the cool kids. And I don't know, I've really tried to change that. So um, I hosted and created a makeover show in Canada called Fashion Dis, and it was like for people with mobility aids, because like wanting to give people with disabilities makeovers and these like photo shoots that could add to these images so that other people could see themselves. And I mean, it's really been this greater visibility has been snowballing over the last 5, 6, 7 years. I'm really proud to be part of it, but certainly it's much bigger than just what I'm doing. And for me, it just feels like selfish, like and just like I want to still feel um like I have access to fashion and style. It's a tool for us to communicate how we feel about ourselves, what our personalities, what our identities are. And it's kind of taking that control back of what that message is. Because when you are disabled and you use mobility aids, you can feel like people are drawing these negative conclusions about you based on these things, like before you even open your mouth. Like your disability walks into the room, it's like the first thing that
Yep.
has anything to say about you, and it sucks.
Yeah, it does suck. It does suck, but I think you've handled it beautifully, and I so appreciate that you have made it fashionable to use a mobility aid. And, there are others out there too. Like you said, in the last, I don't know, 5 to 7 years,
Yeah.
we have seen a lot more in fashion, a lot more in celebrity, a lot more really cool mobility aids out there.
That's the other part, right? Is the companies that are recognizing that people with disabilities do want access to cool devices, and they are making better products. And it's not just mobility aids. It's you can get grab bars now that look beautiful, and it's like everything that you want to have in your home, in your space. Like you don't need to look like you live in a hospital. There's no reason why grab bars need to be, like, ugly.
Right. Yeah.
No
Yeah, and
reason.
yeah, and rollators and walkers and wheelchairs and canes. I mean, some of the canes out there are just
Yeah.
stunning. I've seen a lot of them come across my feed. Once you get into the algorithm, it starts feeding
Yeah.
you things, and I'm like, "Oh, that's really pretty." So,
And it's just like eyeglasses, right?
yeah,
It's like it is a cane is just like eyeglasses. It serves this function, and it can also help you express your style. Like, can you imagine if there was just one medical looking pair of eyeglasses? Like, we don't
right.
stand for that anymore.
Yeah, right. Switching gears a little bit, talking about how healthcare can be a blessing and a curse. Um, one of the stories that you shared is with MS, a lot of us have bladder control issues, and how you were offered all these different ineffective medications for your bladder issues that came with lots of side effects before you were offered a catheter, which solved a lot of your problems. Talk a little bit about how frustrating working within healthcare can be for us sometimes.
I think my journey to the catheter was what maybe inspired me to write the blog. It was certainly my first important blog post because it was this revelation to me of how actually kind of simple it was to solve this problem. And it was pitched to me with this kind of end of the road, last resort energy. And I was like, this can help people. Like, I want people to know that this is not scary. It doesn't hurt. It solves a problem. Like, it has given me back my freedom. And yeah, it was like something that I had to figure out on my own. And a lot of MS is that. And it was, I think I've been capping since 2006, and I don't know how much has changed in bladder health because I don't really have bladder issues anymore. But I do feel like there's such a steep learning curve with MS, and this is another reason why MS peers and friends is so important, and social media, whatever, just like that information sharing, because we don't have enough resources in this country, in your country, probably in any country, to manage all the minutia of MS. If you're seeing your doctor for 20 minutes a year, you might not get to all of these things at once. And a lot of it is trial and error. And capping is something that works for me, and it's maybe, some medications have worked for other people. So it's a
Yeah,
lot of yeah.
excellent point. Yeah, I love that you talk about how we all share information, how we can help each other. You're right, that 20 minutes with our doctors once a year or once every 6 months, doesn't quite cut it, and
No,
seeing how others live with their MS and their symptoms can give us aha moments. We
totally.
all have it differently, and, you know, I used to be so afraid of mobility aids, and now, thanks to people like you, I'm like, "Oh, these can be fashionable, and this can I'm not gonna be confined to my aid, I'm gonna be liberated by my aid." Without it, I might be
Yeah,
confined to home or confined, to my bed or missing out on life. So,
for sure.
having resources out there from other MSers has just been a godsend, and your book is definitely one of those.
Thank
Uh,
you. I think I just wanna say, like, make it clear that I was not born embracing mobility aids. I have cried many, many, many tears over the process of adapting and adjusting to mobility aids. It is not easy. It is a loss that deserves to be grieved and mourned. But I do want to say, like, you can come out on the other side of it and you can discover that it will, let you do more when you're traveling, let you enjoy your kids more, let you enjoy your life more, and that you can achieve that sense of peace. So if you're in it right now, it's okay to not be where I am now, but it's good to know that it's possible.
Yeah, yeah. In the book, you talk a little bit about grief as well and how it's not static. It's something that we deal with over the years as our MS changes and evolves, and we grieve, and then we move on, and life is good again and joyful.
Yeah. That's one of the hallmarks of MS is this constant uncertainty with, I think I've said before, when you have a disease of the central nervous system, it's like anything that can go wrong might go wrong. And that can put you in this state of fear for me, for sure. Like figuring out how to navigate that constant fear of like what comes next is a real struggle. It's something to learn with MS, but also that feeling of perpetual grief. I've just adapted to I can't drive a car because of vision loss. That feels like a totally different disease than weak legs or a weak bladder. And it can sometimes feel really unrelenting. And that's something that a lot of us have to deal with. And, that's one of the one of the times I think when it really helps to again have those peers who have navigated that symptom and come to adapt and adjust to it.
I recently did a video on my worst MS symptom, and it is fear. Fear is my worst symptom, and not knowing what's going to happen. But over the years, I have developed some skills and gotten some help with my therapist, and learned from experience that I can live with it. It's not going to go away completely. It
Yeah.
never will. The fear is always a little bit in the back of your mind of what could go wrong. Um, but it's I think with the experience of years, we find that we can be really adaptable.
I think one thing that has helped me manage fear is seeing anytime I've started a new treatment or a new therapy, I've tempered my expectations by saying I would be happy if I just don't get worse. And for me, when I realized that, that's a message of like, okay, I've adapted to what I have now. And I maybe there were times when I thought I would never be able to adapt to that. And reminding myself that I've done that over and over and over again gives me the reassurance. Sometimes it works when I'm like really in the pit of fear of saying, like, okay, you didn't think you could handle this, but you can. And chances are you'll be able to handle what comes next. And yeah,
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned treatments and medications and therapies. We've seen a lot of changes over the years,
yeah,
and I sometimes say that we live in amazing times when it comes to MS. Just 30 years ago, there were no treatments, none, and now there's over 2 dozen treatments, and we have so many more options, and they know so much more about neuroplasticity and how the brain works, and how we can treat and slow MS down. And that really comes through in the book too. Um, talk a
I'm
little bit.
glad. No, well, I'm glad. I mean, I would um, hope that anybody who's diagnosed after me uh, hopes and realizes that their odds of having better outcomes than me are good. So we have made a lot of progress, that's for sure, and it's exciting now to see what's happening. You know, with this smoldering, more progressive disease, that's really where the future of research is, and I think hope that good things are coming for sure.
Excellent. So let's end with a little talk about lessons learned over the years, lessons learned with love and career and um, just adjusting to living with chronic illness. What have you learned?
Um, Well, I think maybe the number one lesson for me is about joy. The difficult life doesn't have to be a joyless life. I can do hard things. I think when I was diagnosed with MS, I thought all of my best days were behind me, which was totally preposterous and untrue. When you think you don't have a next chapter, you know, when I lost singing, and like that's been a surprise of my life too, just to find out in my 40s I can like have a complete new chapter reinvention. That's really exciting. And just like the value of, I think relationships are the most important thing. It's like what's going to get you through anything. Like cultivate and nurture those friendships and relationships and dogs and go outside
And travel.
and travel. Yeah. Listen, I don't want to end this interview without viewers noticing our accidental on theme color coordination. I'm in orange. Vickie is in pink. We look like the book color cover. I could not be more pleased with the aesthetics of how this turned out.
We did not
The
plan this.
details matter, right? I love it though. It's awesome.
Awesome. Ardra, thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure. You can find Audra online. Just type in Tripping on Air. You will find her. She has a website, she has a blog, she has a YouTube channel. You can also, if you're in Canada, you can find Fashion Dist. If you have the ability to trick your internet to thinking you're not in the US, you can find Fashion Dist too. It's a really good show. I highly recommend it. I'll also put a link below to her book. I highly, highly recommend it. What's next, Audra?
Oh my God, everyone keeps asking me this. And I'm like, I just wrote a book, like resting on my laurels. Can that be a thing?
Book tour.
Um, yeah, well, yeah, I do have some book tour stuff happening, and honestly, like that's what I want to focus on right now. I am really just like itching to talk to people about the book that it's resonated with. I'm also recording the audio version later this month.
Yay.
So, yeah, so then watch out for that.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to the audio version.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Again, thank you so much, everybody. You can find the link to the book and all of Audra's websites and podcasts and YouTube channel below. If you'd like to see another interview that I did with Audra and her podcast host,
Alex,
Alex
Alex Hadge.
Hadjar, you can watch this video next. And until next time, be well.